Hello, my name is Sam Sullivan and I'm partnering with Greenwood Furnace State Park to talk with you about the many different benefits that composting has. We'll also be talking about how easily you can compost in your very own home. Now, you may have heard the term composting before, but what exactly does it mean? Composting is the act of taking organic materials and recycling them where otherwise they would have been considered waste and just thrown out and wasted. Through composting, these materials can be decomposed and then can be reused to be food for gardens or other plants. Now let's talk about why you should even start composting in the first place. Composting has many benefits, and a few of them are saving money, resources, energy, and saving the environment in general. Now, food waste is one of the largest contributors to landfills, and when food is wasted and ends up in these landfills, it decomposes without access to oxygen, which then creates these harmful greenhouse gases, which get into the air and then cause a lot of problems for the environment. Through composting, we are not only keeping these food waste items out of landfills, but we are also lessening the greenhouse gases that are emitted and are creating a better environment overall. Now, there are many different types of composting, with the big three being aerobic, anaerobic, and vermicomposting. Aerobic composting introduces air into the environment and helps break down materials quicker, and as a result, it needs to be rotated every few days just to make sure enough air is getting to all the different materials in the compost. Anaerobic composting, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of aerobic. This is where the composting is sealed and no air gets inside, and it uses bacteria to break down materials instead. This can create kind of a bad odor, so it isn't the best option if you're trying to keep your compost odorless, but it is a great way to break down these items. Vermicomposting uses oxygen, moisture, and worms in order to break down these organic materials and has very little stench overall. In our activity today, we'll be using aerobic composting, which uses oxygen, so don't be grossed out by the worms or the bacteria discussing other methods. We'll just be sticking to aerobic. Now let's talk about the materials we're going to need for this composting activity. So to start, you're going to be needing 2 plastic bins or buckets and only 1 lid. These bins can be any size. I use 2 5-gallon buckets, but you can use big tubs, or you can go even smaller if you need a smaller item for a smaller space. The lid is needed to retain the moisture, so that is definitely a must. You definitely need to get your hands on a lid. Next up, we have a drill and a sharp drill bit. This is going to be used to drill holes around the top of the container to provide airflow, so you can have that nice composting with little effort. Next up is a trowel, and this is going to be used to turn and rotate the compost materials every few days. You'll also be needing some water, and this is going to be used to provide moisture to help the process along. Next up, we're going to be using some brown matter. So brown matter is basically organic matter that is rich in carbon, which is any plant waste that is dry, fibrous, and hard. These are more resistant to decay and add room for air to circulate, and they're slow-burning food for the compost heap. Examples of these are cardboard, newspaper scraps, dead leaves, eggshells, nutshells, small twigs, hay, and wood chips. With me, I have twigs and dry leaves, which are a great option that I just found in my backyard, but you can use any of those above examples. Next up, we have green matter, and this matter is the organic matter that is rich in nitrogen. And this matter is going to be mostly wet or recently growing materials. The green matter tends to heat up the compost pile, which is a good thing because they help the microorganisms in the pile to grow and multiply quickly. Now, your green matter is going to be any of your food waste, plant clippings, grass clippings, or houseplants. Now, with your food waste, you don't want to be using any cooked foods, meat, dairy, oils, or fats. This will not be good for your compost bin and will cause a lot of odors, so definitely steer away from those when you're creating your compost bin. Some things that you should use with your food waste and your green matter is raw fruits, raw vegetables, coffee grounds, and tea leaves, for a few examples. Next up is garden soil, which is optional, but it can be nice to speed up the breakdown process, but this isn't needed to start your composting, so don't feel pressured if you don't have any. I just used some dirt and soil from my garden. I didn't actually use potting soil, but either would work just fine. All right, first up, you're going to be grabbing your 2 plastic storage bins of the same size, and you can find them around your house, or you can go to a store and buy them. I bought mine at Lowe's, but any one will work just fine. To start, you're going to be drilling holes into 1 container on the bottom. These holes should be 1 to 2 inches apart, and on the bottom as well as on the sides, but only near the top. This is going to allow the air to circulate and to flow through the composting bin. The holes on the bottom are going to be used to let any moisture or extra water drain out of the bottom of our composting bucket into our extra composting bucket. So that way this moisture isn't going to create any odors or just make our composting not very healthy. Now for the drilling, the drill bit size doesn't really matter, but if the holes are too big, rodents and bugs may get in, so you should keep the holes relatively small, but not too small that the air is having a hard time going through. Next up, after your holes are all drilled into your first bucket, you're going to be placing that drilled bucket into the non-drilled bucket. Like I said before, this allows for extra moisture and water to escape the compost pile and filter into the extra bin. This nutrient-filled liquid is going to be known as compost tea, and you can add this to fertilizer in your garden and it will help your plants grow beautifully. Next, you're going to want to determine a place for your composting bin. This can be indoor or outdoors, but when it is colder weather, you might want to keep your composting bin inside because if compost freezes, then it will stop decomposing and will stop the process altogether. So when it gets colder, just bring it inside or just keep it indoors altogether. Great outdoor spots you could use include a patio, in a storage shed, and by a garden. And some great indoor spots include by trash cans, under the kitchen sink, or on the counter, depending on your bin size. Now, what to put in your composting bin? Bins should be 3 parts brown matter and 1 part green matter. So that means it should be 3/4 of the way full with any sticks or leaves or any other brown matter you find. And then the other little bit is going to be your green matter and your food waste. When you're first starting, you're going to gently fill the bin at 3/4 of the way up with damp brown matter, and you're going to want to use a mix of materials. So not all leaves, not all sticks, you're going to want to have a variety of materials. An optional step is to toss a cup of garden soil over it. You don't need to do this, but it will help your composting along. When you have your food waste ready to be decomposed, you're going to use the trowel to bury it under a layer of browns. This is going to help your food waste decompose faster and just better altogether. Now, as for maintenance, you're going to be wanting to aerate the bin every few days to circulate air in the bin and speed up the decomposition. Now, basically what this means is just to take your trowel and just dig up a little bit, get some air under those layers, and that will allow air to circulate and just allow your food to decompose faster. Another tip to keep your compost going faster is to chop and tear kitchen scraps before putting them in the bin, and that way they'll break down easier and faster. If you notice your compost is too dry and it's not composting very well, you might want to sprinkle a little bit more water to add some moisture, and thus it might allow it to go a little bit faster. Now, regarding odors, your aerobic composting bin, which we just created, should not really be creating any odors, but if you are noticing any odors, follow the steps below. If you do notice a few odors, then you should definitely check the moisture level of your bucket. If it's too moist, it is going to be a little too odory, so you definitely want to add some more brown materials, and that should help with your odor control. Another tip for odor control is to limit the amount of food you're putting in the compost bin. If you put in too much at one time and it's not composting as fast as you put it in, then it will create a lot of odors, so definitely just slow down the times you add into the composting bin. Now, final tip with odor control is the oxygen that is going to be in the bin. If there's not enough oxygen, it's not going to aerate as well, and thus there might be a little bit of an odor problem. And you can fix this easily by just adding a few more holes or to aerate it more often. Now, when your compost is finished decomposing, there are a few uses that you can use it for. Your compost should be finished and ready to use between 2 to 4 months, depending on how much food you add in and whether or not you keep going with it. So once it's all done, there are a few different options you have for what to do with it. You can sprinkle it over your grass or your lawn as like a little lawn conditioner, which will help your grass grow very nicely. You can spread it over potting soil to improve your plant life. And then finally, you can collect the compost tea that we talked about from the bottom of the bin for the extra moisture and whatnot. And you can dilute it with water, and then you can spray it over any leaves on your plants. And it's a nice composting tea, and it'll make them nice and healthy. Thank you so much for watching our video about composting at home. I hope you had a great time making a composting bin with us, and that you can really see just how important composting can be. Thank you so much for watching.